Today's daf we're going to be learning is Shevuot Daf Daled. Today's daf is sponsored by Diane Kusher in loving memory of her husband Dennis Shimon Abraham on his third year at site. We all miss him. Today's daf is sponsored by Raquel Pilzer and Jennifer Lankin in loving memory of their beloved brother Avigdor Chai Abraham on his fourth year at site. You are always in our minds and in our hearts. Also for the constant strength and safety of Raquel's husband Zevi in his current round of Miluim. Today's daf is sponsored by Sarah Borelowitz in honor of her newest grandchild Levi, son of Chava and Meir Sturman. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to do Shevuot Daf Daled. To do this, we're going to go back and I'm going to do a bit of a review. It might take a little bit of time, but I think it's very worthwhile because it'll put everything in context and then it'll help understand the flow of our daf. So how did we start? Okay, we had three sugyot as we talked about yesterday, three different sections. We're going to talk about the third. Third section of yesterday's daf basically went to a very fundamental question about the Mishnah. Who does this Mishnah accord with? Is it according to Rabbi Yishmael or is it according to Rabbi Akiva? And we basically said it doesn't seem like it's either because each one has something that doesn't correspond to the Mishnah. Let's just review what that is. Rabbi Yishmael holds that in oaths, the only oaths you're going to be liable for to bring a sacrifice are the future ones, not ones you said about past events. And the Mishnah said, Stein Chain Arba, two in the future, and the two by the rabbis was in the past. So that doesn't work with Rabbi Yishmael. Yediota Tuma doesn't work with Rabbi Akiva because Rabbi Akiva said you're only liable, the Korban Levi Yored, if you forgot you were impure and went into the temple, forgot you were impure, and ate sacrificial items. But you're not going to be liable to bring the Korban Levi Yored if you forgot there was a mikdash or where the place of the mikdash was or that it was forbidden to go into the mikdash, or you forgot that the meat was sacrificial meat or the meal offering was you thought it was just a piece of matzah. So neither one fits. The first explanation was to say, well, maybe you could explain according to each and say, oh, you know what? It really works because each one just meant there's four cases, but some you're going to be liable for, some you won't be liable for. But the Gemara didn't like that. They said that's definitely not what the Mishnah is saying. So they went to option two. Option two was to say the Mishnah accords like Rabbi Yishmael, not Rabbi Akiva. Accords like Rabbi Yishmael, really it's talking about is not what we thought the Korban Levi Yored, but it's talking about lashes. Okay, and that's what we're trying to resolve. So we're trying to deal with this answer. We think that the Mishnah is talking about lashes, and then it works fine for Rabbi Yishmael because Rabbi Yishmael will say that Shevuot, oath, Stein, Chain, Arba is two about the future, and those you're going to both get a Korban Levi. Now, what's the difference between lashes and Korban Levi Yored? Well, it's a different case because Korban Levi Yored you bring if you're unwitting about it. You didn't realize that, you took an oath and forgot that you took the oath and then you ate the food or didn't eat the food, or you took an oath and you thought that, yesterday you thought that this, and again, yesterday, Rabbi Yishmael doesn't think you're liable. However, if you did it intentionally, you knew that you ate yesterday, whatever it was, and then you said, I swore I didn't eat it, and you know you did, that's a whole different story. That's lashes. And obviously it would be a case where somebody warned you before you took the oath and said, if you're lying, you're going to get lashes. And then you're going to get lashes if you did it intentionally, whether it's on the past or whether it's in the future. That's a shvuah checker. You lied under oath. Okay, so that's our explanation. The first problem with this explanation, we're going to raise some other big issues, and eventually we're going to reject this entirely. Today's about raising issues for that answer. First issue is that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Stam Mishnah. And this is a Stam Mishnah. Now, if we say it's lashes, one of the four cases is a case where you say, I swear I will eat tomorrow, and then you don't eat. Now, by not eating, you're not actually doing an action. That's called a lav shein bo maaseh. Now, you'd have to say Rabbi Yishmael holds lav shein bo maaseh, lo kiyin alav. You get lashes even on a lav shein bo maaseh. But Rabbi Yochanan doesn't hold that way. And if Rabbi Yochanan holds like a Stam Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan will hold like our Mishnah. And Rabbi Yochanan holds that you don't get lashes. So that obviously doesn't accord, which means our Mishnah can't mean that. Okay, that's the problem. If we explain our Mishnah to be lashes, this thing with Rabbi Yochanan just doesn't work out. But the Gemara has a resolution, and they say, don't worry, Rabbi Yochanan holds like a different Stam Mishnah. And we're trying to figure out what that Mishnah is. We suggested something yesterday, it didn't work. Now we're going to bring another suggestion. That's where we start today. So starting on Daf Gimel Amud Bet at 2 lines from the bottom, Elahai Stama Eshka. This is the stam that Rabbi Yochanan held. Shvuah shelo ochal kikar zo, shvuah shelo ochlena. Now you say a double language of an oath. You say, I'm taking an oath that I won't eat this loaf of bread. I'm taking an oath that I won't eat it. Now, if you go ahead and eat it, you only have to bring one sacrifice for this because you already forbade it in the first statement. The second statement is meaningless. But that's not what's important. Comes the Mishnah and says, and this is a Mishnah later in Shevuot, we'll get to it. The Mishnah says, Zohi Shevuot bitoy. This is, now whenever it says this is, that means this and nothing else. This is the case of a Shevuot bitoy, an oath of expression. That's our topic that we're in the Shevuot here. That's which the type of oaths we're discussing here. Shechayavin al donamakot ba'al shigigata korbano levi oled. This is the one case where you're going to be liable lashes, and you're going to be liable the sliding scale offering, which, by the way, Alana Stein-Heinz went up all about the korbano levi oled. Okay, so if you haven't listened, you can listen to that. To understand better about this whole concept of a sliding scale offering. But anyway, the point is, now, first of all, for a sliding scale offering, this isn't the only case. So obviously, this is the only case, must be referring to what? Zoe d'chayvim al dona makot, right? This is the only case you're going to get lashes. Aval ochel v'lo achal lo lake. Because what happened in this case? You said, I swear I'm not going to eat it. And then you ate it. So there's an action. That's why you're going to get lashes. But if you did the reverse, and you said Shevuot she'ochal, and you said, I swear I'm going to eat, and then you don't eat, that you're not going to get lashes for. That's the obvious inference, or at least obvious to the Gemara. It's the obvious inference from that Mishnah, in which case we found our case. Rabbi Yochanan holds like this Stam Mishnah and not our Mishnah. And that resolved it, but not exactly. So our first slew of questions are going to be like this. The obvious question, if there's two Stam Mishnahs, why did Rabbi Yochanan hold by this one and not our Mishnah, right? It seems a little arbitrary. To which the Gemara responds with a counter question. According to that question, Rebbi Gufe. Now, Rebbi is the one who organized the Mishnah. He edited it. Now, if Rebbi edited the Mishnah, why did Rebbi use Stam Mishnahs? Usually because we hold that way. So it's super confusing now. Forget about the Rabbi Yochanan. Why did he choose this one over that one? Okay, maybe we come up with reasons. But why did Rebbi, very confusing language, right? Hacha is here and hachi is like this. So why did he do it here like this and here like this? Okay, which really you would say here like that and there like that. Okay? Or here like this and there like that. Okay? In other words, why did Rebbi organize? Especially, we're in the same Masechet here. And in one chapter, right, in one daf, one Mishnah, Rebbi says, Lav Shem B'Maaseh, you get lashes for, which is ours. Again, it's all according to this interpretation of the Mishnah. Because when we read the Mishnah originally, we thought it was talking about a sacrifice. We didn't think it was talking about lashes. But if you explain it to be talking about lashes, which is what we're in, that second answer, how can we make this Mishnah accord according to one of the opinions, was to change it to lashes. So if we say that, and then we make the inference from the other Mishnah, right? It's not two Mishnayot that explicitly contradict each other. It's just based on the way we interpret each Mishnah. There's a contradiction. Why would Rebbi bring, and again, what does it mean a Stam Mishnah? It means it doesn't come as if there's a machloket. Rebbi could have said, okay, we have two different opinions here. One person says, Lav Shem B'Maaseh, we get lashes for. One says you don't get lashes, and that would have been a different story. Then we would have no problem. But Rebbi puts them in the Mishnah without any name, without any machloket, as if this is what we do. So super confusing. So forget about why did Rabbi Yochanan pick that one instead of this one. Why did Rebbi put them all there? So the Gemara is going to answer, and that resolves both questions. And that's why they're kind of countering it with the question to basically resolve it. Ella, it must be me'ikara savar lav shein bo ma'aseh lokin alav v'satma. Originally, Rebbi held and thought that we hold that a lav shein bo ma'aseh you get lashes for. And therefore, Satma, he basically just wrote it as an unattributed Mishnah. V'hadar, but then he went back and changed his mind. Savar ein lokin alav v'satma. And then he decided, no, you don't get lashes. He changed his position. Mishnah lo zazamim koma. We don't move a Mishnah from its place. Meaning, once Rebbi put the Mishnah in there, we don't take it out. So therefore, we started with one case, right? One opinion. Rebbi changed his mind, but once the Mishnah was in there, the Mishnah is there. Okay? And therefore, that explains everything. Okay, and that explains also why Rabbi Yochanan chose the second one, because that was Rebbi's later position. And again, he holds like Stam Mishnah. So if that's Rebbe's right answer, of course, it's weird that Mishnah lo zazamim koma, because now it's super confusing to people who don't know this. But again, and this is also just a theory, eventually we're going to reject this anyway. So it's not really going to be true. But we've seen this before, the Mishnah lo zazamim koma. Sometimes there's a mistake in the Mishnah or something, and they just leave the original because they leave the original. Okay, it's a whole interesting question of itself, why we have this principle, Mishnah lo zazamim koma. But we're going to leave that for now. But now the Gemara is going to ask another question. On assuming that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yishmael and it's Malkot, we have a problem. B'mayu kimtik, Rabbi Yishmael ula Malkot. Wait, so you're explaining in the second explanation that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yishmael and it means the whole thing is lashes, not korban like we thought originally, not a sacrifice. But now we're going to assume if that's korban, then everything, if that's Malkot, then everything else in the Mishnah is Malkot. So marot negai my Malkot ika. If you have a leprous mark, okay, what do? You go to the Kohen declares a leprous mark, you have the quarantine time, you have this, that, and then you have a process of purification, 7 days, and then you bring a sacrifice. There's no lashes. You don't get lashes. If you develop a leprous mark, we don't give you lashes. So what kind of lashes is there? Well, bikotzeitz baharto. No, there is a case of lashes. What's the case of lashes? The case of lashes is you're not allowed to cut off a leprous mark. If you cut off a leprous mark, you get lashes. So we found a case. Uke Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Eli, and it goes like Rabbi Avin, who said in the name of Rabbi Eli. To Amar Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Eli, because Rabbi Avin said in the name of Rabbi Eli. Kol makom shenemal hishamel pen ve'al eno ela lo taseh. He said, generally, what's a lo taseh, a negative commandment? And usually it says, don't do this, right? Don't steal, don't, right? Those are lo taseh. But there's other words that, according to Rabbi Avin, in the name of Rabbi Eli, also mean a negative prohibition. And those words are either hishamer, which is observe. That usually means observe, don't do something. Like shamor v'zachor on Shabbat, right? The shamor is all the negatives. Pen, lest you do something, or al, don't do something. Those are all negative prohibitions. Now it says hishamer b'negat sarat. You should observe the negat sarat. And what do they learn from there? You should observe by not removing it. Okay, you don't cut it off. So anyone who cuts it off gets lashes. So there we go. We resolve that. Yitziat Shabbat, my malkodika. But what about Shabbat? Carrying on Shabbat, you don't get lashes for. Why not? You get the death penalty if you transgress Shabbat. And it's lav shenitan lasharet mitapeitinhu. And this is a negative prohibition, right? You're not allowed to do malacha on Shabbat. But it's a negative prohibition that is given to the death penalty. And what did we learn about this already in Masechet Makot? Kol lav shenitan lasharet mitapeitin ein lo kinalav. If you have a negative prohibition that is associated with, that is coming to teach you, don't do this, and if you do it, you'll get the death penalty, you don't get lashes. Now, why would you think you get lashes? Well, what if, right, the only case you could theoretically get lashes would be if somebody warned you, right? Usually you're about to be b'chalel Shabbat, somebody's going to come over to you and say, do you know that if you're desecrate Shabbat, you'll get the death penalty, and only then will you get the death penalty? What if somebody came and said to you, do you know that if you do that, you're going to get lashes? Will you get lashes? Right? They didn't warn you death penalty. So even though it's a lav that was given to the death penalty, on the other hand, they warned you lashes. You're not going to get the death penalty. Maybe you get lashes. Well, there's a principle that says, lav shenitan lasharet mitapeitin, you don't get lashes for. All negative prohibitions of the Torah, like lo tachsom shor b'disho, don't muzzle your ox while the ox is threshing, right? That all means there's a negative prohibition, you get lashes. But not if it's a negative prohibition that's supposed to get the death penalty. So therefore, there's definitely no malkot by Shabbat. To which they say, and here you have to be very careful to read what they're going to say here, mishum hachi. This is the reason why kamukmina ke Rabbi Yishmael. This is exactly why when we got to answer number 2, right, when we rejected the first possibility, we said we're going to explain the Mishnah according to Rabbi Yishmael and for lashes. Why specifically Rabbi Yishmael and not Rabbi Akiva? Because of this issue. Because there's no way to get to Malkot for Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva holds lav shenitan lasharet mitapeitin, you don't get lashes for. But you could explain it according to Rabbi Yishmael because, pay attention, De Amar, Rabbi Yishmael is the one who holds lav shenitan lasharet mitapeitin lo kinalav. If you remember, we saw there was a machloket in Masechet Makot, and now we're going to say, that explains why when we came up with the second answer and we switched everything, we said, oh, it's not what we thought that it's korban, it's actually lashes. The only way to explain this Mishnah would be according to Rabbi Yishmael because of the issue of Shabbat. Because of the lashes on Shabbat, Rabbi Akiva will never get to a case of lashes on Shabbat. Now, this is basically saying that when they started suggesting Lo'olam Rabbi Yishmael and it's Malkot, not Korban, they already had read forward into the Mishnah, understood where it was going, thought it all out, and realized we can't explain this according to Rabbi Akiva. We can only explain this according to Rabbi Yishmael because we'll never be able to explain Malkot on Shabbat. Rabbi Akiva will never have the case of Malkot on Shabbat, but Rabbi Yishmael does. Okay, that sounds good, but what? The Gemara says, Halav hachi kaima ke Rabbi Akiva. Wait, remember, now this is why I say very, very strongly. It's for this reason that they went with Rabbi Yishmael. What do you mean it's for this reason? It couldn't go according to Rabbi Akiva. Why not? Because Yediyot Tuma is a problem, remember? Yediyot Tuma Shtayin Shein Arba. Rabbi Akiva holds that it's only 2 for forgetting that you were impure, not for forgetting Mikdash and forgetting Kodshim. So, Kashi Yediyot. It doesn't make any sense, right? This line, again, it's not that it doesn't make sense. It's this line that specifically worded it as not just saying, oh, yeah, well, Rabbi Yishmael fits with him. No, it said this is the whole reason why they started with Rabbi Yishmael and not Rabbi Akiva. But what do you mean? They couldn't start with Rabbi Akiva. They have the problem of Yediyot Tuma, which doesn't work like Rabbi Akiva. There's no way to resolve that. So they said, no, no, no. What do you mean there's no way to resolve it? We could resolve it the same way we resolved Rabbi Yishmael. How so? Lav Amar Rabbi Yishmael hi ula malkot. In order to resolve it, according to Rabbi Yishmael, what did we do? We switched it to malkot, right? It's not korban, it's malkot. Well, Rabbi Akiva nami ula malkot. You could just say Yediyat Hatuma means someone who intentionally knew they were impure, anyway went into the temple or ate sacrificial meat. And you could explain the Mishnah that way, and then it would fit with her. And then what's the issue? Not sacrifice, but lashes. You could have done that. And then you could have explained the Mishnah according to Rabbi Akiva. Why didn't they? Back to where we started. Because if you did that, Rabbi Akiva would never get to a case of lashes in Shabbat. He could have explained Tuma as a case of intentional and not unwitting. Gemara says, wait a minute though. How could you possibly say Yediyot HaTuma is lashes and it's intentional? Ihachi Yediyot Hatraot Mebaile. If you want to say it's intentional and it's lashes, it shouldn't say Yediyot. Yediyot implies I knew, but like I forgot and then I figured out, right? It should have said warnings of impurity, meaning you were warned that if you got lashes, it could have maybe said something else, but they're trying to come up with a different word instead of Yediyot HaTuma. Hatraot HaTuma. You were warned about impurity and you went in anyway, you get lashes. The word language idiot certainly doesn't fit. To which the Gemara says, Halo Kasha, don't worry about that. Okay? In other words, we could have explained it that way. And then again, we're back to square one, which is you could have explained it according to Rabbi Akiva. And then we explain our answer. In other words, again, we could have theoretically explained it according to Rabbi Akiva because we could say, Tinei Yediyot HaTraot. Say it's knowledge that one was warned about. Okay? One knew they were impure and then someone warned them and then they got lashes. And then again, what does that explain? It explains that line. This is why they went with Rabbi Yishmael and not with Rabbi Akiva. Because the Shabbat issue was the problem, not the Yediyot HaTuma, right? Remember, this sounds like we're isolating. The only one reason why we couldn't explain the Mishnah according to Rabbi Akiva is the issue of Shabbat. Because Rabbi Akiva will never get to Shabbat because he doesn't think you get lashes for. But everything else we could have explained because we could just amend the words a little bit. Let's read the Mishnah as Yediyot HaTraot and not Yediyot HaTuma. Right? Yediyot HaTraot HaTuma. Wait a minute, though. That still doesn't fit with the Mishnah because Ihachi, if you're going to say that now, and it's not just a question on this last line. Now, let's just assume we resolved Rabbi Akiva. It could have been, we resolved that one line. It could have been Rabbi Akiva, but the Shabbat issue made it a problem. But now we're going to reject everything we said until now in answer number 2, which is right now we're assuming it's Rabbi Yishmael, it's Malkot. We've resolved, right? We've explained Shevuot. Right? Shevuot fit now because Shevuot, even according to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yishmael, you'll get lashes for them, even though you won't bring a korban levi ored. The tsarat, it's the leprosy, right? If you cut off your leprous mark, you'll get lashes. Shabbat, if someone warned you, you know you're going to get lashes. If you do that, you'll get lashes, according to Rabbi Yishmael, which fits in with his other opinion. What's the problem? Yediyot HaTuma really doesn't work for 3 reasons. Okay, and now we're going to reject this answer completely. So even though we spent a really long time on it from the beginning of, Amud Bet and yesterday's daf, and we're almost at the bottom of Amud Aleph, we're going to reject it completely. Number one, for three reasons. Number one, Yahachi, Steinchen, Arba, Tarti Utahavyan. If you say it's intentional, how did we get to four cases of Yidiyot HaTuma? We said one, I forgot I was impure and I went into the temple. Two, I forgot I was impure and I ate sacrificial meat. Three, I remembered I was impure, but I forgot that this is where the mikdash is and I can't go into the mikdash, or I forgot I can't go into the mikdash impure. Four, I remembered I was impure, but I forgot that this was sacrificial meat or meal offering, or I forgot that I can't eat sacrificial meat or a meal offering while I'm impure. Those are four cases. But if you turn the whole thing into intentional, it's very obvious that there's only two cases. The only reason we have multiple permutations is because you could forget one thing and remember the other. But in this case, you either were impure and went into the temple, or you were impure and you ate sacrificial items. There is no four cases. Okay? When you turn it into intentional, there's only two ways to do the sin. Those are the two ways. Number two, vitu means not two. Two means and all the more so, or in addition. It's just and again. One of the next, later in the Mishnayot that we read already, because we read the whole chapter, it then brought an example of what's Yidiyot HaTumah. You knew about it in the beginning, you forgot about it, and then you knew again. And that's the one case where you bring the Korban Levi Orei, the individual offering. Remember, that was when we had, if you remembered in the beginning and then forgot and never remembered, right? That's what the Seir or Rosh Chodesh, or we had the whole debate about what they all go for. But specifically now, obviously, right now. So again, Yidiyah b'tchila, Yidiyah b'sof, Helem ben time. You knew about in the beginning, you knew about in the end, and then you forgot in the middle. There is no such thing as forgetting when it's lashes. If you forgot, you don't get lashes. That's unwitting. You bring a sacrifice. And if that wasn't proof enough, Vitu, and furthermore, Harezeh ba'olevi yored. It says in the Mishnah, you bring a sliding scale offering for this, which means the Yidiyot HaTumah for sure is a sliding scale offering, and it's all unwitting, and it's not lashes, which means, because our assumption was, if you're going to say that the Shevuot is lashes, then you're going to have to say they're all lashes. This answer doesn't work. So they reject answer two, and now we're moving on to answer number three. Ela Amar Rav Yosef, Rebbi v'nasib la'aliba ditanai. So Rav Yosef says, this is Rebbi. Now, what did Rebbi do? Remember, Rebbi is the one writing the Mishnah. So when Rebbi put together this Mishnah, who cares if one case is like Rabbi Akiva and one case is like Rabbi Yishmael? Rabbi Yochanan put together the Mishnah. In other words, he did part of the Mishnah like one Tana and part of the Mishnah like another Tana. B'yediyot, nasiv like Rabbi Yishmael. When it came to the impurity, he did like Rabbi Yishmael. B'shvua, when it came to the oaths, nasiv like Rabbi Akiva, he did it like Rabbi Akiva. So now we're going to have a little modification of Rabbi Yosef, which makes a lot of sense. And that's going to really take us till the end of the daf today. Amarav Ashi, Amarita Lashmata Kamei Rav Kahana. When I told this to Rav Kahana, what Rav Yosef had suggested, the Amrali, he said to me, Lo tema Rebbi Nasiv La'aliba Ditanai V'Leilo Sfirale. Don't say it like Rav Yosef said. The Rebbe brought one line like Rabbi Akiva, one line like Rabbi Yishmael, but he doesn't hold that way. In other words, like, it's sort of just saying, well, when he decided to edit the Mishnah, he put in that like that and that like that. No. Ela Rebbe Tami did nafshe mefarish. Why did Rebbe go with Rabbi Akiva in one and Rabbi Yishmael in the other? Because that's Rebbe's personal opinion. He held like Rabbi Yishmael on one of the issues and like Rabbi Akiva in the other. When it came to oaths, he went with Rabbi Akiva. There's Shtayim Shem Arba, right? Also, the Shavar, you're going to bring a korban. And when he went like on the Yidiyot HaTumah, he actually held like Rabbi Yishmael, who said that it's for all four cases. Also, if you forgot the Mikdash, and also if you forgot Kodesh. So that's Rebbe's personal opinion. Okay, so instead of saying Rebbe just organized it like this, it's more like that was Rebbe's position. Now what they're going to do is they're going to prove that Rebbe holds like in each case. And it's not just enough to suggest this, but now we're going to go about proving it. And this is going to take us well even into tomorrow's daf. Ditanya. So first we're going to explain the case of Tuma, impurity. How do we know that Rebbe holds, like Rabbi Yishmael, that Tuma Mikdash v'Kodashav, and the whole thing includes forgetting Tuma and also forgetting Mikdash or Kodesh. Ditanya. Minayin she'eno chayav ela al sheyesh b'yediah b'tchila v'yediah b'sof v'helem b'intayim Talmud lomar v'ne'elam shnei pamim divrei Rabbi Akiva. This is a little complicated, so bear with me. First, we're going to quote Rabbi Akiva, then the Braita is going to quote Rebbi, and that's really what we're looking for, what Rebbi holds. Okay, Rebbi argues with Rabbi Akiva about drashot in the pasuk, and that's why Rebbi doesn't hold by Rabbi Akiva's position, and you're going to see that's why we're going to see specifically he adopts the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael when it comes to Yediat HaTuma, that it includes Tuma Mikdash and Helen Mikdash. You forgot about the Mikdash, or you forgot about the sacrificial items. So this is all based on these two psukim that we read in Vayikra. It's Vayikra Hey, if you want to look at them again, verse 2 and 3, where it talks about somebody touches something impure. Remember, both psukim were about an impure person forgetting they were impure, and then they go into, right, now it doesn't even say what they do, but they do something wrong, which they assume is either going into the temple or eating sacrificial meat. But what it says in these psukim is, V'ne'elam mimenu, right? The person forgets. And in one pasuk, it's bringing, there's two examples which really sound very similar. In the first pasuk, it says, right, the person forgot, V'hu tameh v'ashem, and he's impure and is guilty. And in the second pasuk, it says, V'ne'elam mimenu again, and the person forgot, V'hu yadav v'ashem, and the person knew. Now, it's not the same. The first one said, V'hu tameh v'ashem. The second time it says, he knew, or she knew, and was guilty. So now the question is, why does it say v'ne'elam two times? And what's with this word yada that appears only in the second pasuk? So comes Rabbi Akiva and he says, this all teaches you that in order to be liable, the korban, according to the pasuk, you have to have knowledge from the beginning. Okay, now that's, okay, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Then you had to have forgotten whatever it was, right? Forgot, let's say that you were impure, and then knowledge again at the end. Now, which one's obvious? Okay, the one that's obvious, although we're going to debate this after, but the one that's obvious to Rabbi Akiva is the knowledge at the end. Because if you don't have knowledge at the end that I know that I became impure, well, how can you possibly bring a sacrifice? You can only bring a sacrifice if you know you did something wrong. You don't bring a personal sacrifice on just guesswork. Maybe I did something wrong, right? Or if you have no idea you did something wrong. That was the whole idea, the whole concept of the Serizim on Rosh Chodesh and on the holidays, and that it atones for things you don't even know about. You can't bring a personal sacrifice if you don't know. So obviously knowledge at the end is critical. Now look at the pasuk. The second pasuk says, Ne'elam mimenu, the person forgets, and then they found out. Okay, so now the yediah at the end is totally unnecessary. So why does it come? It's to teach you, comes Rabbi Akiva and says, okay, the first ne'elam is just so you know that you forgot. Okay, that's the case. Yeah, it's a case of shkaga, you forgot. The second ne'elam comes to tell you, and basically what he has to do is he has to put the words yada before. It tells you that in order to be liable, this korban olev yored, you have to have known at first that you were impure and then forgotten. Okay? Now, if you didn't know before and then forgot, you're not liable. And that's what he learns from the double language of Ne'elam. But again, according to Rabbi Akiva, it doesn't teach you anything about extra cases. It's just two cases here, and both cases are impurity. It's all about you're impure. And you either forgot Mikdash is case one, you forgot your sacrifice. I'm sorry. You forgot you were impure and ate sacrificial meat, or you forgot you were impure and went into the temple, knowing it's forbidden to go into the temple when you're poor. You just forgot you were impure. Okay, and the double ne'elam is really going to teach you this chidush that the case is yediah in the beginning, and obviously yediah in the end, because otherwise you're not bringing a korban. But the hu yada at the end there is coming, and the whole ne'elam, the second one, is coming to say there has to be yediah before ne'elam, before you forget. Rebbi says, tzarich. I don't need a drasha to tell me knowledge in the beginning. If the pasuk says vin ne'elam, what does vin ne'elam mean? And it evaded you, right? You forgot. Well, you can only forget something you knew. So obviously there's knowledge in the beginning. This is the reverse of the other. Obviously there's knowledge at the end. He says, obviously there's knowledge in the beginning. So, harei omer. Okay, now he's going to say, well, it says v'ne'elam, and this is what I just said a minute ago, turning out I'm a bet. It says v'ne'elam, michlal di'ada. From there, it's obvious that you knew because the word ne'elam means I knew something and I forgot it. Vihu yada. So why does it say vihu yada? Okay, hare kan shtei idiot. Okay, now the yada at the end comes to teach you, right? And he keeps the words in order. Ne'elam, vihu yada. Okay, he doesn't think that's as obvious. Okay, and therefore, okay, ne'elam means, right, you knew already before, that's obvious. Hu yada comes to teach you. You also need yada at the end. And therefore, okay, that's already your shtei idiot. So why do you need two cases, two recitings of the word v'ne'elam? Says l'chayev al helim tuma v'helim mikdash. Here you go, Rabbi Yishmael. He says the reason why ne'elam appears twice is to teach you there's another case. It's not just the pshat of the psukim. I forgot I was impure. It also teaches you the extra ne'elam. I forgot that it was mikdash there. I forgot that that was sacrificial an item. Okay? And that's why he gets l'chayev al halem tum'ah ve'halem mikdash. And that's how he gets the two extras. And from there we see that's Rebbi. From there we see that Rebbi holds, like Rabbi Yishmael in the tumah issue, impurity. So the Gemara now says, okay, we get now that Rebbi had his own opinion. Remember, that was what Rav Kana said about Rav Yosef. He said, well, I'm going to modify what you said a little bit and say it's not that Rebbi was just adopting that position here and that position there for the sake of the Mishnah. No, that's how Rebbi held, and we just proved that Rebbi held like Rabbi Yishmael when it comes to Tumah and didn't hold by Rabbi Akiva's position. And that's based on his own drasha. Shevuot de'ile tami dinashe minalan. But where do we get that in Shevuot he holds that way also? How do we know that in Shevuot he dafka holds like Rabbi Akiva, that it's also on Shevuot in the past? And I'm going to skip the words in parentheses. There's some different girsaot here of how to read this. It's all basically the same idea. Anyway, it's just a different way of what the question was, but it's the same question. It's just worded differently. Svarahu. It's just logical. Why? Rabbi Akiva, my time, a kamachayev l'shaval. What's the reason why Rabbi Akiva says you're liable for past also? De darish riboy umiute. And therefore, Rabbi Nami darish riboy umiute. Now we're going to get into the world of riboy miu klalu prat. Okay, let's try to remember for those who've learned this already. For those who have not, this might be new. These are two different methodologies of darshaning the Torah. The first thing to understand about riboy miut and klalu prat, riboy miut klal prat, they're all really one and the same. Riboy is a word that's including a lot of things. Miut is something that's so riboy is including. Klal is including. It's a general, right? A very general word. Both riboy and miut mean general words. Miut and prat mean very specific. So when the Torah does, we're now going to talk about a klal, pratu, klal. Okay, there's all different kinds, and a riboy, miut, a riboy. Okay, where it both has a general, then something more specific, and then general. The difference, so klal, pratu, klal are all darshaning the same words. Where there's a general, there's a specific, there's a general. Okay, let's talk about it when it comes to the Shevuot, for example. Okay, and then I'll talk about the differences. If you look at Rashi quotes, I'm going to just skim the Rashi here, and darish riboy and miute, I'm skipping a few lines. Nefesh kiti shava, person who takes an oath. That's a general term, right? That's riba kol shvuot. Okay, that's going to include any kind of oath. But then it says lahara ulehitiv, only future. That's already specific. It's not any vow, any oath, I should say. It's not any oath. It's a future oath. And then later it says lechol asher yish. Let me just find it in here, right? Sorry, let me find the whole pasuk. It's easier. Open it up. Okay, open. That's this page. Okay, right. It's pasuk dalet in that chapter. Nefesh kichi shava levateh b'sfatayim lahara uleitiv lechol asher yivateh ha'adam b'shvuah. Anything that anybody expresses, that's already anything. So you see, you have either you call it a klal prat klal or you call it a riboy miut riboy. It's the same thing. General, specific, general. What's the difference between klal prat klal and riboy miut riboy? Klal prat klal, we say, and I forget the words exactly, but it's only ke'en haprat. It's only going to be things ein bachlal elamasha biprat. Okay, we're only going to include in the general principle here things that are similar to the prat. So in the end, because it starts klal, then goes prat, then goes klal, we're going to include, but only things And that's not only the prat, but only things that are really similar to the prat. If we go with the Riboy school of thought, they basically say, oh, what do you mean? It went back to Riboy. Riboy included everything. Then what's the miyut for? Well, it excludes a little bit, but it mostly includes. So the Riboy is a much more inclusive drasha, and the Klal Prat to Klal school of thought, again, these are just two schools of thought of how to darshan these things, is much more specific and limited. So Rebbe, you can see now, if he darshans Klal Prat to Klal, if he were to darshan Klal Prat to Klal, it would be much more limited. And that's what Rabbi Yishmael does. He darshans Klal Prat to Klal, and he limits it. Only things that are laharau leitiv, future. Rebbe goes with the Riboy Miyut, which is inclusive. Okay? And that's what we're going to say right now. So, and Rabbi Akiva also. So Rabbi Akiva and Rebbe darish Riboy Miyut. Now, we need a little more proof. We can't just throw it out there. This is what Rebbe does. So we're going to bring a proof from a different source that Rebbe darshans Riboy Miyut. Titania. Rabbi Yomi. And now we're going into a different topic entirely, where Rebbe uses Riboy Miyut. Okay? It's about Pidyon Ben, redeeming the firstborn son. You have to pay the Kohen money. In what form do you pay the Kohen? Bakol podim bechor, Adam. You can use anything you want. Chutz min hashtarot. The only thing you can't use is bills. Okay, why bills? Because bills, right, or docket, right, what they really mean, they don't mean like a dollar bill. They mean a promissory note. They mean an IOU. If I owe you money, right, and I give that, right, and you have a document that says Michelle owes me money, and you want to give that to the Kohen to redeem your firstborn son. What's the problem with that? The problem is it doesn't have any inherent value. It's just a piece of paper. Okay, and that's why it's like a bill. Okay, they didn't have bills, dollar bills in those days, right? But it's the same idea. It's a document that represents money, but it only represents money. It doesn't have any inherent value. That you can't use. Rabbanan amre bakol podim b'chor adam chutz me'avadim u'shtarot v'karkaot. The rabbis have a much more exclusive definition. Okay, they exclude slaves you can't use, they exclude also shtarot, and they exclude land. So my time at the Rebbe, we're going to see the difference between them is Riboy Miyut or Klal Prat. My time at the Rebbe, Darish Riboy Miyute, Upduyav mi ben chodesh. Upduyav, you redeem the child, okay, from a month old. Redeem sounds like any way you want to redeem it. Riba, that's a general. Berkacha kesef 5 shkalim mi-8. But then it says money, right? 5 shkalim, but it says money. So that already limits. Tifdeh, then it uses the word tifdeh, redeem, chazar v'riba. Okay, that already includes another general term. Riba mi-8 v'riba, riba hakol. Okay, so when it does the riboy miut, it then includes everything. But remember, it doesn't really include everything because there is a miut. So my riba kol mile. So first it includes everything. My mi-8, what did it limit? Mi-8 shtarot. It said not promissory notes. Okay, that's Rebbe. Rabbanan darshe klali uprate. They use the klali prat rasha. Upduya mi ben chodesh klal. That's a general. Again, it's the same exact thing. It's just, again, going to be more exclusive, more, right, excluding things. Be'erkacha kesef 5 shkalim prat. Tifteh chazar v'kalal. Klal upratu klal, yatadan elakena prat. Right, so when you have a klal upratu klal, that now I got the words clear. I couldn't remember them exactly. You can only, yatadan, you can only rule like the prat. You can only include more details that are very, very similar to the detail. So the detail was money. So ma prat mifurash davar mitaltel. So what defines money? Number one, it's movable. Vigufo mamon, and it has inherent value because they're made of metals that have value in them. Av kol davar hamitaltel, vigufo mamon. It has to be something movable, and it has to be something that has inherent value. Yatsu, now you might remember this whole language. We had this a lot in the Bavas. Yatsu karkaot she'em metaltalim. Okay, land is not movable, so that's out. Yatsu avadim shukshu lekarkaot. There's a pasuk that says your slaves, which are your Canaanite slaves, you pass them down from generation to generation to your sons, and they are achuzat olam. They live with you forever. They're staying in your property forever. And that's like land. Achuzat, land is also called achuzah. So because it's used in the terminology is nachala, nachalu lebnechem achuzat olam, it's like land. So whatever we say is true for land is going to be true for slaves. If we excluded land, we excluded slaves. And obviously, yatsu shtarot, even though shtarot are movable, these promissory notes, but they don't have any inherent value. They're just symbolic of money, and therefore they're out. So that's the klal prat versus the riboy umiyut. I'm going to tell you something that's relevant for tomorrow already, but I don't want to not tell you this right now. But we'll only deal with it tomorrow, which is there's something a little off about this riboy umiyut, riboy or klal prat to klal in this case. And this is just, I want to tell you because this teaches you, and I specifically didn't mention it until now, because I want you to learn how to learn, which is when you read this, okay, so you say, oh, that's a classic klal prat to klal or riboy umiyut riboy. But if you look at the pasuk inside, it's not really. Because klal pratu klal is first there's or riboy miut riboy. First there's a riboy, then there's a miut, then there's a riboy. This doesn't work that way. Look at the pasuk. And this teaches you that you really have to open pasukim when you're learning. It's not enough to just hear the pasuk. Now, it's not always possible, depending on how much you're learning and whether you can always do this. But look at the pasuk. Upduya mi ben chodesh tifdeh berkacha kesef chameshet shekalim b'shekel hakodesh esrim geirahu. Notice, upduya mi ben chodesh tifdeh. Those are both the general ones. And the mi'ut, berkacha kesef, comes at the end. That's already a different story. It's not exactly a classic klal prat klal or riboy mi'ut riboy, but that for tomorrow. But I wanted you to already see that and understand how important it is to open the psukim inside. So right now, we're trying to prove how we know. We wanted to say Rebbi holds like Rabbi Yishmael in one issue, like Rabbi Akiva in the other issue. How do you know that he specifically holds like Rabbi Akiva here in this issue of the Shevuot? It's because he holds riboy v'miut. How do we know he goes by the riboy miut school? Because we see it in this case of Ufdu Yomi ben Chodesh. Now the Gemara asks, what do you mean? V'ha Rebbi klale uprate darish. Rebbi's not from the school of thought of the riboy miut. Rebbi's of the school of thought of the klal prat. How do we know? From a different braita. Okay, so now it's super confusing. One braita says Rebbi uses riboy miut. One braita says he uses klal prat. So we're going to end in the middle of this question. Ditanya, Martzea. Now we're up to a different Evid. This is talking about the Evid Ivri. We have a Jewish slave who's supposed to be a slave for 6 years, and the 7th year goes free. But this slave wants to stay with his master. He likes living there. He wants to stay. We pierce the ear. How do we pierce the ear? Well, what does it say there? Martzea. You have to use I think it's an awl maybe. Okay, it's a metal implement. Ainli ela martzea. Minayin l'rabot hasov asira amachat amakdeach amaktev. It is an awl. Thank you. So how do we know that? Two different kinds of thorns, that's the soul and the sirah, or a machad or a needle, or a makdeach and a machtev. These are other, machtev is a stylus, right, from lichtov, and a makdeach is like a drill bit kind of thing, whatever they had in those days. Okay, so how do you now? Notice the categories here. Soul and sirah are thorns. They're not metal. They're not like a martzea. They're not like an awl. Macha, makdeach, machtev are all metal implements. So now we're going to say the following. Talmud lomar v'lakachta. There's the general term v'lakachta. Kol davar shenokach bayad. Divrei Rabbi Yossi bar Yudah. Notice he uses the word to say we're including everything, even though it says martzeh, we're going to include anything that's like it that could basically pierce a hole. That's the more the riboy miut type. Rebbi amar martzeh. Mar martzeh miyuchad shel matechet. Af kol shel matechet. Rebbi goes by the klal prat. He says it's only things that are similar to the detail. Can only be metal, and he excludes the sirah and the soul. Okay? Therefore, ba'amrinan, and they say, b'mai kamiflige, what's the root of the machloket? People say, Rebbi darish klali uprate, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda darish riboy miute. So now we're stuck. Okay? We have a problem. We just proved that Rebbi holds riboy miute, and that's why he holds like Rabbi Akiva, which is what we were looking for in the case of the oaths, but doesn't seem to accord, right? And we proved it from the Pidyon Haben. But wait, in a different place, now he didn't use the words riboy umiyut, klal uprat, and riboy umiyut there in that braita, but the rabbi said that's exactly what the machloket is, and the Rebbe's on the side of the klal uprat. So now we're a little stuck. We'll have to wait till tomorrow to figure it out. So what did we do today? We started with the second answer. We were in the middle of the second answer of how to explain the Mishnah. The Mishnah, right, it doesn't accord like Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael, and it means malkot. We went through how could other cases be malkot? We kind of explained them. We said, oh yeah, that's why we start with Rabbi Yishmael, because he's the one who says with Shabbat, you still get lashes. But then we ended up with the Yediot Hatuma clearly didn't work, and therefore we reject it, because that's clearly shkaga, and it's clearly korban, and it's clearly not lashes. Then we said, okay, so Rebbi, in the end we explained, it's just that Rebbi took Rabbi Akiva in one and Rabbi Yishmael in the other, and that's how we resolved. You're right. One is Rabbi Akiva, one is Rabbi Yishmael, but it's okay because that's what Rebbe held. And we're in the middle of proving how do we know Rebbe held that way. We've proved already how we know he held in the Tumah case, how we know he held like Rabbi Yishmael. And now we're in the middle of proving how do we know he held like Rabbi Akiva in the oath case. And that's what we're in the middle of. And we'll finish up from here in tomorrow's talk. Wishing everyone a good day.